Okay, good morning again, everyone, and welcome. My name is Camicia Blackwood, and I am delighted to welcome you to another installment in the Spatial Webinar Series titled ArcGIS for Disaster Management. We are very happy to have you joining us today. This session is especially meaningful as we focus on a topic that is critically important to our region. The Caribbean faces the threat of hurricanes and severe weather events every single year. And we will continue to develop new strategies and technologies to better prepare ourselves. But these events constantly remind us just how much more prepared we need to be. Today's webinar is designed to explore how technology, specifically ArcGIS, can play a powerful role in improvising disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. We will be looking at how geospatial tools can help organizations make faster, smarter, and more informed decisions before, during, and after a disaster. We're honored to be joined today by members of the Spatial Innovation team, our acting CEO, Mr. Roshaun Clarke, and our talented solution engineer, Ms. Natalie Dobbs. Mr. Clarke will provide strategic insights into how GIS supports disaster management at an organizational and a national level. Ms. Dobbs will take us through a live demonstration of the ArcGIS software, showing practical real-world applications of these tools in disaster scenarios. Now, feel free to send your questions in the chat at any time or use the Q&A feature. At the end of this session, we will host an interactive Q&A and discussion segment because every question, every perspective matters and every idea counts. Although this hurricane season has left its mark, our work does not stop with the storm when the storm passes. Even now, as recovery continues, we are reminded that resilience is not just about rebuilding, but learning, improving, and preparing for what lies ahead. Once again, welcome to the Spatial Webinar Series, ArcGIS for Disaster Management. We're grateful to have you with us today, and we look forward to an engaging and meaningful session. I now invite Mr. Roshaun Clarke to begin. Roshaun?
Thank you, Ms. Blackwood. Can you confirm that you're hearing me clearly?
Confirming, I'm hearing you very clearly.
Okay, thanks. And warm greeting to all participants on this call, on this webinar. So ArcGIS for disaster management is a timely topic, as my colleague just mentioned. We're living in a world that is constantly changing, and it's accelerating in that pace of change. From climate crisis to overpopulation to racial injustice, and more relevant to our region, loss of biodiversity, natural disasters. We are in a space now that whether it's an organization, an individual, or a nation, we all have challenges at a global and regional scale. And some of those examples are such as hurricanes that are hitting us every year in the Caribbean. Some of these images show the aftermath of Hurricane Melissa as well as Hurricane Beryl last year. And so it brings home the fact that we have more regular hurricanes. I draw your attention to the image to the left. This was taken by me on my way home after Hurricane Melissa passed, and I could not pass this part on the mountain because the hillside came down, and as you can see, a vehicle was also locked in or embedded in that landslide. These are real life situations, and they matter. Similarly, there are earthquakes that plague our region, whether it be from the 1600s, 1692, when our capital, Port Royal in Jamaica, was hit by one of the largest, one of the most intense hurricanes, leaving half of that city under the water to this day. Or more recently, in 1907, where we had a big hit in Kingston, or more recently, like Haiti and other islands being hit more recently. Earthquake is another natural disaster that plagues us. And of course, coming out of the hurricanes and heavy rains and tropical storms, we also are plagued with the different levels of floods. So overcoming these challenges requires better understanding, communication, and collaboration. Our best science, technology, and problem-solving capabilities. But really using geography and GIS, they can provide the content and the context. So we use GIS to measure, to visualize and map, to analyze and model our problems, to help us plan and design a solution, use the data to make data-driven decision-making, and of course, it leads to action. But understanding precedes action. And so we have to use GIS to understand what are all the variables to best manage our disasters. Now, if we could just take a step back and explain ArcGIS in a holistic form, it's the world's most comprehensive GIS technology platform. What it is a tool that can be applied and used wherever you are in an organization. It can be used through the cloud, over the internet with applications that gives you the power of GIS right at your fingertip on a mobile or on your computer. You can also use ArcGIS Pro as a software if you're a GIS professional developing maps and building on top of those maps. Or you could use it within an enterprise or a server environment behind a firewall for some larger organizations that desire so. And as you can see in the upper right corner, that's your mini ArcGIS, if you will, within your enterprise. It also interacts well with location services and content such as base maps and drone imagery and so on and so forth. So it's a holistic approach to any challenge that you have. And a bigger look at it is, or a deeper look is to say, it's a brain. ArcGIS is a brain of GIS capabilities. And it pushes out different systems or enable many different systems, whether it be a field operation system or mission critical system, land management system. And it's very good for collaborating with stakeholders through many different user types. So as we look at some of the examples of how we managed the last disaster in Jamaica, we knew that we had to collaborate with different entities, different individuals, and they could interact with the system at different touch points. So as you see at the top, a viewer would refer to maybe someone who just needs to see the end product of the GIS work. That might be as far up as your prime minister of your country or a head of an organization that just wants to see an overview, a bird's eye view or a helicopter view of what's happening, but they're not going to be the ones working on GIS. A contributor might be how one agency works with another agency by contributing to one general platform. Someone from the infrastructure side of the government could be contributing with some data to the emergency response folks or to the armed forces and so on and so forth. Mobile worker would be the person who's going out or the individuals going into the field and collecting data. And then the creator, the professional plus are more the actual GIS professionals who are building maps, analyzing, visualizing, sharing, and doing deep analysis and predictive modeling with the software. Now, as it relates to disaster management, there are 4 guiding principles or 4 stages, if you will, that GIS supports. The standard for disaster management is mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And at each of those stages, ArcGIS empowers those initiatives, whether it be from a mitigation standpoint, which is like your long-term planning to ensure you have the least impact of disasters, to the preparedness, preparing your dashboards and your modeling, to your response, going in the field, collecting data, being time sensitive and getting real-time updates, to recovery when you're in a longer term process of cleaning up, whether it be debris, whether it be rebuilding, assessing damage, buildings and so on and so forth. And I like to say that it's really a cycle because your mitigation, which would have been your plans, will help to drive the preparedness. Your preparedness is what you use when you go into the field to respond to the disaster. And as you start to recover, you will have lessons learned that will help you to create even more mitigative measures. So it is a constant cycle of acting, learning, monitoring, and reviewing and improving. Examples of this is, as I mentioned, we had the earthquake in 1907, and part of what happened was there was a wild fire that spread across all of Kingston. And coming out of that, we have very strict building codes to ensure that we're more concrete based as opposed to wooden based. You might see some of that coming out of the post analysis of Hurricane Melissa, because a lot of the damage was to buildings and structures that were not necessarily designed to feel that level of impact. Hurricane Melissa was a very, 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 very hard hitting hurricane. And so it will help us to prepare for more that may come in the future. All right, so common tools that we look for are GIS tools for disaster. We look for dynamic maps, especially if they're shareable in the online or offline environment. A lot of times when the hurricane hits, the internet is down, the power is out, and so you still need to be able to use dynamic maps in that environment. Of course, field apps for missions and situational awareness, and I will show a few of those apps. Dashboards are very critical for communication and monitoring. Digital twins, which are digital replicas of our physical environment. GeoAI is a powerful tool for analysis, for object detection and just getting things done faster. And then, of course, GeoPortal is critical for collaboration. Along with those, there are additional needs that are not necessarily GIS, but fuel and pump the GIS, data mainly, and of course the people. So we need satellite imagery, we need crowdsourced data from the public, we need drone imagery, and of course we need bandwidth. We found that during this hurricane, it was well handled because we had people coming from all over joining forces to help with the capacity. So let's look at maps and apps. This is an example of a public map that is on the Esri DRP site. It shows, currently I took this morning, a screen grab of this, and this is showing natural disasters as it happens around the world. This particular map that you're seeing is showing 4 different cyclones in the Pacific Ocean area. A month ago, this map was showing Hurricane Melissa in the Caribbean. You can filter in, zoom out to any part of the world and quickly monitor. And this is something that is like the first step when we're approaching a hurricane, whether it be something like this from Esri or something from the meteorologic office. We need to always be tracking the path that the hurricane is taking. Those who were watching it with Hurricane Melissa side, it looked like it was going to hit Jamaica at many different points, and it kept on moving. It was moving very slow. And so it's almost like a 3-4 day period where we were watching closely to see when it's gonna turn, if it's gonna turn, and eventually it did turn north and come up from the southern side of the island. So the maps are very, very important for the starting at the outset. There are applications within ArcGIS that you use to go in the field. As I mentioned, field apps. One of the most powerful and one of my favorite is Survey 123, which is a bit of a form, a digital form, but it's geo-enabled. So you imagine you're going to homes, or in the case of shelters that are being opened for the public, data can be collected that can be fed into a larger data set. And this is very important because it's one thing to collect data, but if you don't collect it with any spatial component, it's kind of left out there to not know where. You need the where in all of the data collection. Survey 123 is very good for that. There are field maps that you can go out into the field and collect more data. And there's quick capture, which allows you to quickly capture key factors in the field. There's Navigator as well. And these are just some of the applications in ArcGIS that would allow you to go to that point of interest. So let's say you have dispatched an emergency team and they know the location, and they could always use a Google Maps or something like that to navigate. But within the system and within all the different data sets that you have in your system, Navigator helps the person in the field with the mobile worker user type to get to where they need to get to in one ecosystem. And then, of course, dashboards is one of the most powerful means of communication that has been from COVID-19, the pandemic response, to even before that. And I'm sure in the future, especially with AI enablement, dashboard continues to be a critical tool for communication and monitoring. So having said that, I would pass over to my colleague, Miss Natalie Dobbs, who can walk us through a demo, and then I'll pick up afterwards with some more of the tools that can be used from ArcGIS for disaster management.
Thanks, Roshaun. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Are you seeing my screen, Roshaun?
No, I think I may need to stop sharing. 1 second, please. I'm seeing your screen now, thanks.
Good morning again, everyone. So welcome to our demonstration. For our demonstration, we'll be looking at ArcGIS solutions from Esri, and we're specifically looking at the hazard mitigation planning solution. So Roshaun had mentioned the disaster management cycle. So what we're looking at in the demonstration can be used in the disaster management cycle for mitigation, which is before the event. And one of the other templates that we're going to be looking at can also be used after the event. So firstly, we're looking at the risk assessment profile. So this is to understand the risk of your particular area of interest, which has been demarcated on the map. So that's the area that we're looking at. To understand the risk to transportation routes, this is very important because in a disaster, you need to move possibly heavy equipment, citizens from one area to the next. So you like to know where the different roadways are located, which roadway is a major roadway, a smaller roadway, because class 1, class 2, class 3, because you may need to move heavy equipment. Additionally, you may need to know where the population is concentrated and what is the land use for a particular location. So looking at our area of interest, we're going to zoom in and we're going to turn on the demographics layer. So this is where we're able to view the demographics for this area, and the legend helps us to see the population concentration. Additionally, in understanding the risk is looking at critical infrastructure and assets. Critical infrastructure could be hotels, hospitals. Well, sorry, not hotels as critical, but for hospitals, you could look at dams, where they're located, to know where it is that these critical infrastructures are located. For the hazard mitigation outreach, so this is the ArcGIS Hub landing page. So as defined by Esri, ArcGIS Hub is a cloud-based engagement platform that allows organizations to communicate more effectively with their communities. So looking at the landing page, your different stakeholders can look to see how is it that you plan to use hazard mitigation to help the community. It can help you to understand the risk to a particular hazard. If it is that you need to show where there are vulnerability to secure funding. If after the disaster, you want to be able to quickly build resilience and reduce costs. So we're going to look at another application, which is a hazard explorer. So we're looking at different hazards. We have our area of interest demarcated. And the hazard that we're going to look at is hurricane. So the application has information such as historical hurricanes. And the good thing about a dynamic map is that you can click on the different features and you can get information about past hurricanes of past various areas. You can also turn on the historical hurricane tracks. And this is where you can see in line format the path that the various hurricanes have passed. Additionally, if it is that you want to see more information, such as understanding the area that is at a high risk to a particular disaster, which in this instance would be hurricanes, we can scroll down the legend and we see which area is very high, relatively high risk, going to relatively low to very low. So this area, earlier we had looked at the risk assessment profile and saw that population, there is a high concentration population in some of these areas. So this can help with the mitigation to plan for hurricanes. So looking at a past hurricane trajectory, this will help the various agencies and stakeholders to know how best it is that they need to move resources. So you have other hazards that you could look at. You could look at earthquake, which was mentioned by Roshaun, extreme heat, landslides, etc. So scrolling down our hazard mitigation outreach hub site, you can have a section where you can have engagement with your stakeholders. So say, for instance, you have a draft plan and you like persons to be able to view your plan. So they can have access to your documents, view your plan, and they can give feedback. How is it that they're able to give feedback? Using the hazard mitigation plan feedback form. And this form is using Survey 123. So the form would have different sections of your documents. So persons can indicate which section they like to give a comment or feedback. Also, they can let you know what are the 3 community hazard mitigation concerns for their particular location. So they can select the 3, give their name, email address, and you are it's requested that they'll have to give their location information so that you know exactly where is it that this particular person is located and what are their concerns. And they can indicate to you whether it is that they want to be contacted so that they can discuss their concerns. So this is how you can increase engagement with your various stakeholders, which is very good. Another program and initiative that you could have on your ArcGIS hub site is a shelter app. The shelter app is very good to let the citizens know where it is that shelters are located. So this is the shelter app that I have open. From the legend, they can see which shelter is open, which one is closed, which one is on standby, etc. They can zoom in to their area of interest, pinpoint on the map where they're located, and within a 1 kilometer radius, the application will let them know the nearest shelter. So when you hover over the shelter, it's highlighted on the map and it gives you the name of the shelter that is open, that they can go and get shelter if it is that they're in an area that's in high risk based on the disaster that is approaching. Another good thing about the application, say for instance, they're not sure how to reach the shelter, they could use directions. And the application will provide a path from where they're located to where the shelter is located. So this can occur before the hurricane. They have gotten warning saying that they need to go to the nearest shelter. They use this application to find out the closest shelter and they have their directions. And you can print the information if it is that you like to print information in terms of the path. They have the option, they can do that. So let us look here. This is telling you the different roads that they need to turn and approximate time. And this information can be printed. So this is only a tip of the iceberg in terms of what ArcGIS can provide for disaster management. So there are a lot more options that are available, which Roshaun mentioned. All right, thank you. Roshaun, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Natalie. I appreciate it. I'll just share back my screen. All right, so Natalie showed us examples of how we can prepare using ArcGIS, for example, location of your shelters through a shelter app. And all of these are pretty easy to deploy based on an area application that comes with the package that's called ArcGIS Solutions. And some of these are templated solutions that can easily be deployed, especially in disaster where you have, time is of the essence. All right, one of the other things that we find being used more and more is a digital twin. The digital twin, as I mentioned, is a digital replica of a real world location, or it can be a place, it can be a airport, it can be a city, it can be a community, but it's all the different variables captured and reproduced or duplicated, if you will, in a digital era. One of the examples of this is the Grenada digital twin, powered by Esri and partners. Excuse me one second. Apologies. So this is a screen that you'd see on the screen. You'd see a full picture of Grenada, powered by LiDAR imagery, satellite imagery, and so on and so forth. And what we're going to do is look at downtown Grenada in the capital. And as you can see, there's a detailed digital twin showing, if you look at the layers, you would see many different layers that could be, that has been captured and can be selected and visualized, from the sea level to the landslide susceptibility. These are some models, but what we have showing now is the buildings, the imagery as a base map, and the elevation. And what we can use this to do is model how flooding will affect this area. So with a quick application of some scenarios, we can see that if there's a certain level of flooding, it starts to affect the communities coming right down into the harbor. And so one can start to prepare for this level of rainfall and this level of water, how it would affect the country and the community. And then you can model a second scenario with more rain, and that's what it would look like. Now you start to see communities that are exposed, and so you can better prepare for flooding before it happens. This is a very, very powerful tool. It helps you to be ahead of the curve with some of these disasters, especially flooding. And this is just one example of how a digital twin can be used. Another example, which is closer to home, is the Bluefields community in Jamaica, which we at Spatial, with partners from the University of West Indies, EU, CEBU, the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, and of course the University of Suriname, worked on this project to create a digital twin for a community called Bluefields. If you are into music or into Jamaican culture, Bluefields is the home of Peter Tosh, one of the members of the Wailers. And outside of that, it's just a beautiful community on the west end of the island. They are very organized as a community, and they're proactive with resilience. And the idea is, and they're also on the shores, they're on the shoreline. And as time goes by, the shoreline is receding. And so this project was to help create a digital twin to prepare and monitor their environment. This screen shows on the left the digital twin before the hurricane, which shows some elevation of buildings, that shows a road, shows a greenery. And on the right, it's after Melissa. And you can see clearly the devastation that's happened to some of those buildings. Real time, you can just look and see. And that's the power of a digital twin. It helps you to analyze and assess the damage. And also we have a dashboard running with information coming about the affected surfaces, affected crops, affected buildings, affected inhabitants, and so on and so forth, with maps to justify this. So this is another example of how ArcGIS has powerful tools to help you to with your response and your recovery. Now, I want to talk about the GeoPortal. Natalie mentioned the Hazard Mitigation Hub, and the term for as a product from ArcGIS is ArcGIS Hub, but you can interchange it with GeoPortal. It's really just a home, a site that folks can come on and share data and communicate. Now, when you look at the government of Jamaica, how we handled the hurricane, the National Emergency Operations Center was a home for everything. Within that group, there's a GIS group called NERGIS, the National Emergency Response GIS team, and they would be the organization that's pushing spatial data to the NEOC. But despite outside of that, the NEOC needs to communicate with other agencies from the national and local government. They need to communicate with the public, sending information out and taking information in. They need to communicate with the business community and, of course, the international partners. And all of that needs to be a seamless conversation, or not one conversation, many different conversations, but all in one language. And that's why we'd like to talk about GIS as that one spatial language. Some of the partners to recognize in our work over the last month, Azure, AWS, NOAA has been an amazing partner giving you oceanic data. Esri was at the forefront of it all, coordinating all of these partners. The UNDP, HOT, Esri Venezuela, We Robotics, Jamaica Flying Labs, and of course, Photomapper and Spatial Innovation being the thread connecting everyone. And it's important to recognize these folks because they work around the clock to help response and recovery. Now, one of the examples is this page by UNDP, which has a very good summary of or like a report on what happened. And as you can see, you have different tabs speak to different things. But why I like it is that it speaks to everything within a mapping conversation, spatial conversation. So you'll find that whether it be a damage assessment, they have their information coming down in a dashboard, and then they have their map itself that shows some critical information. Whether it be the debris, because sometimes when we talk about recovery, we think about the buildings, but we're not thinking about the debris from the fallen buildings, from the fallen trees, and how do we coordinate that. So from the buildings, they're showing is 2.1 million tons, personal property 1.4 million tons, vegetation 1.3 million tons. And they can show you those locations. So as the agencies that are responsible for that, probably solid waste management or whichever, and it can be a collaboration between private entities as well as government entities. This information and these maps help to coordinate that recovery and the removal of the debris. Similarly, flood impact analysis is powered through ArcGIS from our partners to show critical information. We know that there are some areas that have become muddy and saturated with water. And so soil quality has to be assessed. We know right now that there are some health factors that have come out of that, such as an outbreak of leptospirosis, and that is directly connected or linked with water and contaminated water. So flooding and animals that pass certain diseases, all that is connected, and all that needs to be monitored very, very closely. And some of that is possible through ArcGIS. I just want to touch on crowdsourcing, because sometimes we talk about GIS and we think about GIS as something only for GIS professionals. But we live in a world now more than ever where everyone is a contributor to different data sets. What we found was one of the partners, PhotoMapper, was able to web scrape, if you will, social media sources, and able to map those through a dynamic map. So you would find that as people posted on Instagram or on TikTok or on YouTube, those were analyzed using GeoAI and tagged once it's authenticated and verified as authentic, authoritative data. An example here is a screenshot showing heavy damage in a particular area in South St. Elizabeth, and the images coincide with the spot on the map. So you can get better information. And this is good for during the hurricane when the folks aren't in the field, they can use this to kind of monitor what's happening. Similarly, a destroyed church in St. Elizabeth by Black River, the St. John Parish Church. You can see the image of it at the upper left corner. And then on the map, you can see where that location is. And you can use that to coordinate efforts and just have real-time updates on what's happening on the ground. So in summary, it's always good to have that mitigation plan. And it's also very good to have that plan designed with the communities involved so that it is complementary to their daily lifestyle and not abstract. You definitely want to coordinate resources ahead of time. You want to be responsive before, during, and after. You want to keep the data as rich as possible, meaning GIS only works as good as the data. Bad data in, bad GIS out, or bad information out. So we want to keep the data as clean, maintain some standards, metadata standards that can help with the overall effectiveness of the data. Maintain one source of authoritative data, collaborate with stakeholders and partners, and then definitely use your lessons learned to improve on mitigation plan and preparedness. With that said, the last thing I would want to say is that for everyone that's on this webinar or anyone who sees this in the future, Esri has a very powerful initiative called the Disaster Response Program. It has been running for a few decades now, and it has been very, very helpful to different people, different organizations and countries, from wildfires to hurricanes to earthquakes to pandemics. It is, for us in the Caribbean, it should be your first line of defense. If a disaster hits, you can simply request an assistance. It goes to Esri's office, which comes back to us as Spatial Innovation, as a distributor for the English-speaking Caribbean. We assess, we approve, we get on the phone with you, we get colleagues from Esri to support, and we quickly help you to get what you need. Not only software, but if you need software, if you need data, if you need technical support, if you need some professional support, we are there to help you. So I encourage everyone, as we face an annual set of disasters, from hurricane to fires to flooding to earthquakes, to leverage this disaster response program. And having said that, I will end there. I would like to thank Kamisia, our moderator, and my co-panelist, Ms. Dobbs, and thank you for your time to listen about how ArcGIS can support disaster management. I'll pass back to you, Kamisa.
All right, thank you so much, Roshaun and Natalie. That was lots of information to digest, but relevant information to the time. So as we are winding down, I'm just going to take the opportunity to ask if anyone has any questions for Roshaun and Natalie. You know, anything that you would like clarification on, anything that would have come to you during this session, or any ideas that you'd like to share. This is an open forum for a discussion. So I am just checking the chats and the Q&A. Okay, so first question, more so I request, Roshaun, will the slides be available for the registrants to be able to view after this webinar?
Sure.
Okay, so I will just note anyone who is interested in receiving the slides and get them over to you. So is there anyone else who would like to have the slides? Okay, yes. Okay, I'm seeing the names coming in. Okay, so while I take note of these names, are there any other questions that you guys have for Roshaun and Natalie? Okay, well, if there are no questions, I would just like to thank everyone for attending this session, and we hope that today's discussion has provided valuable insights into how ArcGIS and geospatial technology can strengthen preparedness, improve coordination, and support smarter, more resilient communities. A special thank you again goes out to Mr. Roshaun Clarke and Ms. Natalie Dobbs for their engaging presentations, valuable insights, and the live demonstration that showcase the practical power of these tools. What gives us confidence is not just the technology we use, but the people behind it, the planners, the responders, the decision makers, and communities who are committed to learning, adapting, and improving every single day. Through strong collaboration, innovation, and shared knowledge, we continue to build safer, more prepared, and more resilient environments. Thank you for your presence today. It shows that we are moving in the right direction where this is concerned. And as we move forward, we encourage you to continue exploring how geospatial technology can support your organizations, your work, and your communities. Preparedness grows stronger through knowledge, and resilience is built through connection and collaboration. So on behalf of the Spatial Innovation team, thank you for being part of this installment of the Spatial Webinar Series, and we wish you a safe, productive, and inspired day. Thank you, everyone.